So I was thinking this was not a story on my list that I keep, but it just occurred to me this morning. So I guess been thinking about living in Carlstead. So when I was in high school, Uncle Joel had this car. It was a 1969 Chevelle Malibu. It was actually the first new car that Mama and Papa had bought, and I think it was when Papa was first in the Air Force or right after he started. And so when Uncle Joel got old enough to drive, they, I don't know, sold this car to him, gave it to him. I'm not really sure how that all worked. And then he drove it for a couple of years, and then the engine blew up. And so they basically they made a deal with him. I think that they would help him buy another car, but part of the deal was he had to give this car to me. So I ended up with this car with this torn up engine, and then I spent a long time removing the original engine in it and then putting another engine in. And a friend of mine, his name was Robbie Netterland, was going to school at the vocational school in Thief River Falls, Minnesota, to become an auto mechanic. So he helped me install this other engine. But anyway, this took months. I'm not mechanically inclined. I will say I didn't realize it then, but I do realize it now that I hate working on cars. But you know, it takes you a while, I think, to figure out what your own interests in that sort of stuff are. So you just assume that your interests are the same as your parents or whatever. So, but didn't turn out to be that way in my case as far as cars go. Anyway, so get this car running. It never really runs well. It doesn't sound very good, but it goes. I mean, it starts, it runs, the transmission works. And so anyway, so that summer, after spending all these months working on this thing, I'm driving the car down to one of our fields. Now, just a quick explanation as to how our farm was. We had a section of land, which is a square mile, 640 acres. We actually only owned 600 acres because somebody somewhere had been willed 40 acres of it or something, and they were it was nothing but trees and swamp, their 40 acres, but for whatever reason they were hanging on to it. But anyway, so we had 600 acres, and running right down the middle of our section of land was a swamp, a very low, wet area that never really dried out. Even in the driest weather, it was still at least muddy, and sometimes it had standing water in it 2 or 3 feet deep. And so we had some fields. So our house, if you will, if you were looking at it on a map, let's say that you were standing there looking at our square mile. Our house, if it was on a map, well, no, if you were just standing there looking at it, our house was in the right corner closest to you. And then we had 2 or 3 fields that were anywhere from 15 to 40 acres in size that were that ran along, if you will, on that same side of the road where our house was. And then on the other side of the farm, we had some more fields. Again, if I remember correctly, again, 2 or 3 fields that were there were 3 fields, I think they were 40 acres each. And then basically the middle part of this section of the farm, it was just trees and swamp. But there was a road that had been hewn, good word, hewn out of the forest by the previous, however many people, owners of this farm. And it was, and generally when we went back there, we were driving a tractor or one of the farm trucks, but not usually a car. So anyway, so one day I'm driving over to the field and I think, oh, I could drive fast. I was going like 10 miles an hour. So I thought, I'm going to drive fast. This will be fun. And this road was pretty cool because it was just cut through the woods. I mean, it was just barely wider than what a tractor would be. Obviously, it was just one lane. It was grass most of the way. It was pretty smooth because it had been hewn from the forest, basically as a track or a trail, or just the natural way people took it. There were some curves in it and everything. So anyway, so I went flying down this road, and by flying, it probably was 35 or 40 miles an hour. But anyway, Vroom, drive, and all of a sudden, ka-chunk, and I hit something underneath the car. Well, of course, being in the list of stupid boys category, I don't think anything about it or say anything about it. Plus, I'm probably afraid I'll get in trouble. So anyhow, I just kind of ignored this situation. Never a good idea when your car hits something underneath. But anyway, I ignored this situation and go on with my day. And I think the next day, I head to town, and I was afraid. I just went over some railroad tracks. I was afraid the phone was going to fall off the holder. Anyway, so I go on to town, and I get to town, and the car quits, stops, loud noise, won't do anything. So of course I have to call Papa, and he comes and he hauls me back home with a chain behind the farm truck, and we get it back home. And long story short, I had punched a hole in the oil pan and had run it out of oil. And of course, as you well know, cars do not like having no oil in them because they seize up, because there's no lubrication. So eventually all the metal parts that are moving just kind of, weld themselves together. So anyway, yeah, stupid. So what do we learn from that? So what we learned from that is, if you hear a big ka-chunk underneath your car, make sure you didn't do any serious damage, even if you can't tell it from sitting inside the car. And the next one is, check your oil. Okay, thanks for watching. Love you.